from, small roles to big roles.
Wow. Let's continue that story. It's
Sure.
a fascinating story, and find out how you saw that opportunity and took such great advantage of that opportunity.
Absolutely.
It's quite a story. Your level of enthusiasm must have been going through the roof at that time.
Oh, if you only knew. I didn't know how I was going to close this deal. So I asked Mr. Ramirez, can you give me the inventory of all your roll stock? So he hands me this big green bar. You remember what a green bar is? Those books with the holes on the sides, and it has green bars all across. Well, that was his old inventory, and it would tell you X number of rolls, 36 inches tall by X number of lineal yards, right? And there were truckloads and truckloads of this stuff.
Well, let's pick that up in a second. Let's take
Sure.
a quick break. Thank you. Welcome. We're continuing our series of interviews with Hispanic entrepreneurs, gathering the stories of success. We've been discussing with Mr. Xavier Saenz, the owner of MRI Enterprises, Inc., his story. And we'd been talking about one of his businesses. His second business was in import-export. And he broke off from a partnership and got into then buying material that was scrap material and selling it to a buyer in Mexico. And so that's the story that we were talking about. And I wonder if we could continue that. You were telling us that you found someone in Mexico who wanted to buy some scrap material, and you found it at the warehouses. And you were telling us about how successful the first part of that was. And
right, and then I got approached by Johnson & Johnson because they had a project that went belly up on them. The material they were using, every time it was sterilized, had a funny smell or a stench to it. So the doctors weren't accepting it. So they had to scrap almost $15 million worth of product. And it was located in a distribution center here in El Paso. They called me to see if I was interested.
This is the material they use to make the operation
surgical gowns and the drapes and all of that stuff.
Wow.
So I go to this warehouse and look at what they have. Almost faint when I saw the potential. And they gave me the inventory, like I said, on a green bar. And I took that home with me, and I told Mr. Ramirez, give me a couple days and I'll get back to you, make you an offer. First thing I do is go back to my office, and I call the manufacturer, Kimberly Clark, and I contact a person, and I said, I need a quote on some material. And they said, what is it that you need? I said, I need roll stock, and I need it by truckloads. And they said, well, let me put you in contact with the right person. So they did, and I explained to the gentleman, I'm going to be buying roll stock in various sizes, truckload quantities, and you need your best price per square yard. And I said, can you email that quotation to me? And sure enough, that same day, he put it together. I get a fax with a quote, and all I wanted to do was confirm what the market price was for the material. So I get the price, and it's 69 cents a square yard. So I said, okay, I'm going to call Mr. Gerardo from Guadalajara, find out what he's willing to pay for this stuff. So I called Gerardo, and I said, Gerardo, how would you like to buy roll stock instead of the scrap I'm giving you from Baxter? And he goes, he says, I would love that, but I can't. It's too expensive. I can't afford it. And I said, what if I could get some for you at the right price? What would you be willing to pay for that? And he got quiet for a minute, thought about it, and he came back and he said, I'd be willing to pay 30 cents a square yard. He says, right now the going price is 70 cents. Well, he was pretty close.
Wow.
And I said, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I said, you'd be willing to pay 30 cents? He goes, yeah. And you could buy how much? He goes, I don't know if he was kidding. He said, I can buy all you can get me at that price. I said, all right, let me call you back in a couple days. So I sit down and I think about this. I said, all right, I'm going to offer Johnson & Johnson 15 cents a square yard. And I called Mr. Ramirez the next day, and I said, I'll pay you 15 cents a square yard for all your roll stock. And he goes, he says, can you do me a favor, put it in writing, fax it to me, and I'll present it to my boss. I said, give me about 10 minutes, you'll have a fax from me. I did that immediately. The next day he calls me up and he says, it's a deal. So I said, well, here I'm going to make 100% profit. I called Gerardo 2 days later and I said, Gerardo, guess what? I said, I got all this roll stock and I have the inventory in a green bar. And he goes, well, how many square feet is it? It was in the millions, right? So he goes, I'm getting on the next airplane to El Paso. He flew into Juarez. He rented a car. He crossed into El Paso. We met for the first time. We hit it off. I showed him. I had brought samples with me so he could see it, and he couldn't believe it, right? So he says, okay. He says, I'll start picking all the sizes that I need, and you tell me when it's a full truckload. I said, perfect. So he started buying from me, and they were probably $80,000 to $90,000 a truckload. Wow. He would wire transfer me the money. We would load the truckload. He would pay for the shipping. And when it was all said and done, at 100% profit, we must have got out of there 20 to 25 truckloads. And I was like, my God, I was making some serious money now, you know? And that's how I got into the medical industry. Wow. I built such a good relationship with Johnson & Johnson. During this time, it was so much for Gerardo to absorb, he started sharing it with other companies that were also cut-sew operations for hospital garments and stuff like that. Another company in Guadalajara and another one in Mexico City. And once these guys realized what I could do for them, they started asking me for finished goods, you know, like first-class product. When we finally finished the last truckload of the roll stock, I went back to Mr. Ramirez. I said, can you give me the inventory for the finished goods? And he gave me another green bar about that big, you know, and he says, here it is, take it, tell me what you offer us, and blah, blah, blah. Take it home that day, and I go over it, and I was going to overnight at DHL to Gerardo in Guadalajara. The next morning, Mr. Ramirez called me, and he goes, Mr. Saenz, I'm sorry, I have some bad news. He says, I can't sell you the finished goods. He says, the company, corporate, decided to donate all of that to Russia.
Oh, my gosh.
Because they would get a better tax write-off.
Right.
If they do that, than selling it for pennies on the dollar. He says, but we really appreciate what you've done for us. You were a big help in getting all this inventory out of here. And man, my heart dropped. I was like, oh man, what an opportunity to get away, you know, let it skip from me. But they started asking me for finished product, and Johnson & Johnson, since I had such a good rapport with them, you know, they were giving me truckloads of this stuff before I even paid for it, because they knew I was good for it, you know, and I'd get the money, and then I'd go pay for it. So now they started asking me for finished goods, and they were selling to me. And I asked them, can you sell this to me? He said, well, normally we don't do that. We sell it only to companies, to distributors. But because of what I'd done for them, they said, we're going to sell it to you. And so they were just selling it to Xavier, Saenz, DBA, the MRI company. And that's how I got into the medical supply business. It grew from there, and that's what my business is today, the medical supply.
So you just graduated into the medical,
yes,
medical supply.
Now we cater to home health and hospice agencies in all of West Texas and New Mexico.
With finished goods, with
yes,
the,
with
the
finished,
gowns.
right.
And you still purchase from Johnson & Johnson?
No, I don't anymore.
Allegiance? Okay.
I purchase the majority of it is from Medline and from McKesson, and many other companies, but the majority are from those two companies.
You buy from the manufacturers?
Sure, directly, yes.
And and so before you went on your own, though, you were in a partnership as you began the import-export.
Right.
What did you learn from that partnership?
Well, I learned the business. I learned the accounting. I learned the relationships with the customers, and I learned how you handle the vendors, the manufacturers, how you buy the product and how you sell it, and how the money has to flow in order to fund the purchases.
So what year was this that you began then to get into the finished goods and selling the larger
In
quantities?
1991.
And you were a sole proprietor at that
I
time?
was.
And where did you have to raise capital to fund your growth?
Well, with all the money I had made from the scrap and the roll stock, I had money to start, to start buying and selling it. So, and at that point I had already established a very good credit history under my name, and it's the MRI company. Things went well, and that in May of 2000, I officially got a employee identification number as a formal company.
So you incorporated in 2000?
No, it was still
Okay.
the MRI company,
Okay.
and then in April of 2005, I became an LLC.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
But you got an EIN number in 2000.
Right. Yes.
As a sole proprietor, you
Yes.
could do that.
That's correct.
And so as you began to grow and learn your business, and you learned to save your money for investment in your business. Where'd you learn that?
Probably in school.
Really?
Sure. Going to UTEP, studying business. I always used to, and I still do today, I'm always reading about success stories. I'm always reading about individuals and how they started from nothing and how they built their businesses. One of the things I did very, very carefully is protect the credit of my business. Right now, if you check DMB, we have excellent credit. We've never failed to pay anybody. We've never failed on a contract. So anytime I need a new vendor, as soon as they run a report, they come back and say, not a problem, whatever you need. And that's what it takes. I protected that very dearly so that sometime in the future, I knew that was going to help my business to continue to grow.
So the business you have today, in a second I'll ask what you do today, but did you have a vision for what you are today back in 2000, 2005?
Well, yes, I did. I mean, I always wanted to build this very big. At one point, I also used to own a electrical business doing installations. I realized, in all the businesses I've had, I've always realized where I felt the most comfortable, where I could picture myself doing something for the rest of my life. And I always liked the medical industry because it's clean and it's very professional. So that's how I got into, that's why I pushed getting into deeper into the medical industry.
And so now, today, you're expanding.
We are. We have expanded product lines. 6.5 years ago, I realized that because I'm a service-disabled veteran, and I registered the company as such, and I got my verification, I realized that there were opportunities with our government agencies to possibly get contracts using that service-disabled veteran-owned classification as an advantage. So I thought, right? It was all this hype. There's articles, you go to meetings, people tell you, wow, you're a gold mine, Well, it's not really true. Unless you build a relationship with a customer, it's not going to matter what you are. I don't care if you're female or service-disabled veteran or